Irashaimase. Hello and welcome to Fitaurus Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fitaurus. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this Saturday we have Star Fox 2, the 1996 sequel to the original Star Fox that was never released. We finally have it in 2017, so what kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. So, pressing start, we have the ability to jump into our mission. We can look at the records, which is basically your leaderboard, and then change your audio from stereo to mono. Clicking on mission, we've got 3 difficulty settings, 2 initially available, normal and hard. Complete hard, and then you'll unlock expert. I've only played a few run-throughs, though, so I only have normal and hard available, and today we'll be playing it on normal. Once you start the game, you get this little cutscene that is basically Andros swearing to get his vengeance on Corneria and launching his forces once again on the Lylat system. So basically he survived the Lylat wars and is out to get vengeance. Of course, General Pepper goes and once again requests the help of the Star Fox team, and here we get to select our character. So instead of, well, unlike most Star Fox games where you're only playing as Fox McCloud, here you can select who you want to play as. So of course we have Fox and Falco, both flying prototype R-Wings. The prototype R-Wings are the most balanced fighter between attack, power, shield, and speed. You've got Peppy and Slippy, who pilot the armored R-Wing, which is significantly slower but has higher shields and a much longer but more powerful charge for your energy weapon. And then you've got 2 new characters who were only ever in Star Fox 2, which means that they never really saw light outside of the game itself, Miyu and Faye, who fly the light R-Wing. Which is basically a much faster but weakly shielded and not very powerful weapon-wise R-Wing. They also all have their own special weapon, so Fox and Falco have the Nova Bombs from the original Star Fox. You've got Peppy and Slippy who have health regen, and Miyu and Faye have shields. The Super Shield, actually. So we'll go ahead and take Fox, of course, and for our wingman, we'll take Peppy. Just personal preference there. No particular reason. The wingman does act as your second life, so if you happen to lose your main character, you can switch to them, or at any point throughout the course, from the map, you can switch to your wingman. The ships do have different looks, even in their low polygonal form, so that's neat. And depending on who you're flying, even the G-diffusers have a different look also. So we have the open world map available here, and this is one of the things that's really awesome about Star Fox 2. Some ideas that we would see in later Star Fox games, but let's talk about this one here. So we have the ability to move around this map, and when we move, the enemies move as well. So it's basically a semi-real time. We'll start off by intercepting these missiles that have been fired at Corneria. So everything takes place with a certain amount of time. We have to defeat Andros within 100 ticks of time, or it'll be game over. Also, if we happen to lose both ourselves and the wingman, then that'll be game over. And if Corneria takes enough damage, that's also game over. So Corneria will take damage by getting hit by missiles, having fighters attack it, or the battle cruisers firing their planetary lasers at Corneria. So the other enemies that we have on here, in addition to the fired missiles, we have fighters, which we can intercept. And we can even see what's in the fighter groups themselves. There's battle cruisers, or rather carriers. There'll be more battle carriers the higher the difficulty, and then we also have to attack planetary bases, which there'll be more of those also if you have a higher difficulty setting turned on as well. So here we've got Titania and Venom that have bases, so let's fly towards those and have a look at those bases. It is possible to get some information on the planets by highlighting them and pressing the Y button. But before we could get to the planet itself, we got intercepted by a member of Starwolf, in this case, Pigma. So, you might have noticed that we're kind of in an all-range mode. So, Star Fox 2 was actually the game that introduced all-range mode, and the vast majority of the battles take place in all-range mode, especially the ones in space. Although, one problem I have with it is even with the Super FX chip, the Super NES didn't have the draw distance to make this very viable. So we're going to go ahead and use our Nova Bomb to make short work of Pigma. Most of the Star Wolf enemies can be taken out with just a single Nova Bomb, so if you happen to have those available as your item, and make short work of them. And since time management is a thing, that's really important. With Pigma down, we move on to Titania. So the enemies will still be moving on the open world map even while we're on the planet themselves. That's something to keep in mind, and it is possible to leave the battle and return to the map if need be. So we get introduced to the Walker for the first time. So the Walker has different controls than the R-Wing. We move around with the D-pad, so we can strafe, we can go forward and backwards, and we can rotate the camera with the L&R. So on this particular planet, we're trying to hit these switches to unlock the gate to a base, and once the base is open, we'll be able to fly into it. We do have the ability to switch back to the R-Wing at any time using the select button, although it is relatively slow. As a walker, we have the ability to jump. Bingo! And it's open. So one thing I haven't really done is, well, I don't have the opportunity to do it here, but you can charge your laser and fire a charge shot. It can be very effective, and it is also possible to get a homing power-up later in the game itself. I accidentally flew through a fire beam there. It is possible to get the R-Wing ignited, and you can douse the flames by just doing the ever-famous barrel roll. Or, well, as it truly is, the aileron roll. So let's transform back into walker mode, take out the enemy that's on this screen. Where are we? Enemy? There we are. So the walker does home on the enemies. It makes it a little easier to use, as if it didn't home, some of these enemies would be very difficult to take out. This guy's speeding up as we destroy him. Oh no, planetary missiles headed for Corneria. So as I said, the things are still progressing on the map above, even as we're on the planet, so the other planet must have fired a planetary missile while we were busy dealing with this one. Once we get ourselves to the boss, we're fighting this core, and they're relatively easy, straightforward affairs. We just strafe around the enemy, shooting the core, and before long, it's destroyed, and we evacuate. So that's the way the planetary battles go in Star Fox 2. And most of them are the same. You might have different requirements on the surface to access the base, and the base layouts will of course be different, but it basically ends up the same way. So just for a little difference, well, no, let's see, we won't. I was considering swapping from Peppy, or from Fox to Peppy, but we'll just go ahead and stick with Fox. So we'll move on to this nearest battle carrier. So the battle carriers are another stage where it's not necessarily all range per se, but we start in space, and we're flying towards our target. Let's get this health regen if we can. So enemies will drop power-ups when you defeat them. We'll just use our boost to close the distance. It doesn't look very big from the outside, but once we actually approach the battle carrier... Bad idea to leave your front door open, by the way. We see that it's actually quite large on the inside. So here on the inside we could choose to stick in the R-Wing, or we can tackle it in the walker. For the most part, these are really similar to the inside of the ships from the original Star Fox, so we're good to go and stick in our fighter itself. The R-Wings are great to use. And we quickly arrive at the core, which we once again transform into walker mode, strafe around, destroy these cones, and that's it for the battle carriers. So, aside from a couple boss fights, that's really everything that Star Fox 2 has to offer. You've got the free range, intercept missions, you've got the intercepting the missiles, you have the planetary missions, and you have the battle carriers. There are also a couple bosses, of which we will see shortly here. Once you've defeated half of the forces that are on there, Andros will get upset. Well, guess not. Eventually, Andros will get upset and he'll launch his boss at you, the Mirage Dragon that we saw in the opening. And we'll have to battle that monstrosity. But it's a relatively easy, straightforward affair. So, let's talk minus flavors and plus flavors for Star Fox 2. So, minus flavors, the game just doesn't have enough variety to it. I feel like you don't have enough variety between the missions. Unlike the original Star Fox and Star Fox 64, which have all these different bosses, there are really only a handful of bosses in Star Fox 2. That's really a big weakness for it, and only having a handful of battle types also hurts it. There's also some technical issues with the free range mode itself, and what I mean by that is the Super Nintendo just wasn't able to handle it very well, so it's clunky moving around in a 3D space. And you also have the problem where if an enemy is far enough away from you, you won't be able to see them in most cases because the draw distance just isn't long enough. But plus flavor-wise, I do really like the open map system. Also, getting to see where a lot of the ideas for the later Star Foxes came from is really, really neat. The free range mode, seeing how it was implemented in Star Fox 2 and then how it was implemented in Star Fox 64, the addition of Star Wolf, so many of those that got carried over to Star Fox 64, and then a lot of the other unused ideas would get carried on to Star Fox Command. The map and moving around and intercepting your enemies was an idea that came from this game that made it into Star Fox Command. And really, I would love it if I had the controls that I have in this game in Star Fox Command, as that's my biggest complaint about that game. It also has the lack of variety problem that this one has. And then, last plus flavor that I have for this one, just the fact that it was released like 21 years late, but it's great to finally experience Star Fox 2, one of those titles that in my teenage years I was highly anticipating and was really disappointed when it came out. And in fact, I actually held a grudge against Star Fox 64 for years because it wasn't Star Fox 2. It was essentially just a rehash of the original Star Fox. And there we have it. Star Fox 2 served up for your enjoyment. So, as far as the flavor of it's concerned, it's something that's really familiar and yet new. Like this is something that we've had tastes of before, but at the same time, maybe not quite like we have it here. So it's one that, for me at least, made buying the Super NES Classic completely worth it. But for your value, it might not be as good of a game to justify picking up the entire Super NES Classic for. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff there to enjoy, so it could be worth it, but it's completely dependent on if you're a Star Fox fan or not, whether you'd want to seek it out for this title alone. And there we have it, Star Fox 2. I want to thank you so much for coming out and joining me for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and as always, I look forward to seeing you again next week.